Gulf States Newsroom, this is the Gulf States Gumbo, your weekly serving of stories from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I'm community engagement reporter Elise Gregg, chopping it up this week. At the end of February, the U.S. and Israel launched massive strikes against Iran, killing the country's supreme leader. Iran responded by launching its own attacks against Israel and U.S. allied states in the Middle East. And since then, there have been ceasefires and negotiations, but the war has continued. And it's not just causing impacts in the Persian Gulf. It's affecting the Gulf South here, too.
Diesel practically, it almost doubled in price.
That's Sledge Taylor. He's a farmer in Como, Mississippi, in the heart of the Mississippi Delta. Senior reporter Drew Hawkins spoke with him and a bunch of other Delta farmers last week.
I sure did. We were all over the Delta, hopping around from field to field, tractor to tractor.
Hi there, Drew.
Hey, Elise.
So Taylor is talking about diesel fuel prices going up, which makes sense to me. I mean, if there's a war in the Middle East and lots of fuel comes from the Middle East, it's going to affect that, right?
Yes, you're exactly right. I mean, the main thing here is that with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, it's that narrow passage that connects the Persian Gulf, right? And it's really this vital choke point in a way. Nothing can get shipped out of the region without passing through it. It's also right at the southern border of Iran. So since the war broke out, Iran shut it down, blocking shipping traffic. And about 20% of the world's fuel supply has to go through the strait. Like Taylor just said, it's causing a massive increase in the cost of diesel.
Sometimes we know that we've only got 2 weeks of fuel.
Oh, wow. Okay, hang on. He's only got 2 weeks of fuel sometimes? How big is his farm, and what happens when he's that low?
So Taylor farms corn on about 4,000 acres. So it's about a medium to small size farm, right? And he does have some cattle. He has some pine trees for timber, but corn is the main crop that he grows. And the reason he sometimes only has about 2 weeks of fuel on hand is because he says he's been buying diesel in small batches to get by, or hand to mouth, as he puts it.
Okay, so he's buying in little bits at a time, basically to try and get through the war. We don't know when that'll end, but in theory, when it does, fuel prices would likely go back to normal, right?
I mean, that's definitely the logic here. Why buy a bunch of diesel now when it's at its highest price if the war might end, tomorrow?
Yeah, that makes sense. I know you talked to a bunch of farmers in the Delta. Is this something that they're all doing?
No, it actually is not. That was something I heard from Taylor specifically. This hand-to-mouth approach that he's doing with diesel is something he's able to do because of how his farm operates. For a lot of his fields, he does what's called no-till, and that means he's not using as much heavy machinery to plow the fields. But some other farmers I talked to, like Anthony Bland in Sledge, Mississippi, a few miles down the road from Sledge Taylor.
Wait, Sledge Taylor, Sledge, Mississippi, is there a connection here?
I'm really glad you asked that. Actually, yes, there is. Taylor's great-great-grandfather, W.D. Sledge, used to own the land that became Sledge, Mississippi. And I haven't found a way to work that into the story, so thank you for asking that. Maybe not super relevant, but I think it's interesting. Anyway, sorry, back to the subject. Anthony Bland grows rice and soybeans on about 2,000 acres in Sledge, right? And he said he doesn't have a choice. He has to buy the full amount of diesel.
We irrigate these fields with either propane or diesel, and so the cost just goes up.
So this is something that's really important here, right? It's a really specific challenge for farmers in the Mississippi Delta. See, farmers in other places like in the Midwest, they can largely rely on rainfall to help keep their fields and their crops irrigated. But Delta farmers, they're not often so blessed, right? Many of them, like Anthony Bland, they have to use these pumps to irrigate their fields. And a lot of those pumps run on diesel.
Okay, so if you need diesel to irrigate your fields and diesel prices are going up, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? I mean, you can't not water your fields, so you kind of have to pay whatever it costs to buy the fuel you need.
Exactly, Elise. And right now, also, on top of all this, the Mississippi Delta is in the middle of a record-breaking drought. And it's pretty serious. So far, this year has been the 10th driest in state history. So not only do farmers like Bland need the fuel, like in general, just to farm, they especially have to have it right now. And he said that price that's gone up is really brutal. I mean, while we were out in his field, he had this little notebook in his pocket that he uses for calculations, right, for costs. And he showed me how much it's gone up since the war started.
So right now, I'm paying 60% more for diesel fuel than I would have been paying 45 days ago.
Okay, so you've got record-breaking drought, and you've got a war thousands of miles away, driving up your fuel costs. I mean, can these farmers catch a break, like, at all?
Unfortunately, Elise, it actually gets worse than that, because it's not just fuel that runs through the Strait of Hormuz. About a third of the world's supply of nitrogen also has to pass through it.
Gotcha. Nitrogen, like for fertilizer, right?
Exactly. You remember Sledge Taylor, right?
Yeah, Sledge Taylor, the one just down the road from Sledge, Mississippi.
That's right, yeah. So when I was talking with him in his cornfields, he was showing me the little green stalks, and you can tell what stage the plants are at by counting the number of what are called leaf collars on the stems. So right now, they're between what's called V3 and V5. So if you count the little joints in the stalks, there's between 3 and 5 of them, right? And this is a pretty crucial stage for setting the plants up for higher yields when they're fully grown. It's when the plant's roots are really clawing deeper and deeper into that dark delta soil. And normally, this is about the time that Taylor would be adding nitrogen fertilizer. But with the cost going up, he says he's having to use less.
I've cut back our nitrogen rates probably 20% this year. I think we'll still be okay. Especially with these cheap commodity prices, why make more of something else that you can't get any money for?
And with Anthony Bland in that little notebook that he had in his back pocket, again, he said that he also can't afford to use less fertilizer. Like with diesel, he has to have the full amount. And he broke down how much the cost of fertilizer has increased.
So I've already penciled that in as far as what it's going to cost me. And so my fertilizer cost is going to cost me $26,000 versus before, this time last year, I would have paid $16,000.
Okay, yeah, wow, those are some really significant increases. But I want to go back to something Taylor said a second ago. He mentioned cheap commodity prices. He said he's not getting money for his crops, right? Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, so earlier you asked if these Delta farmers can't catch a break with fuel prices. Then there's the drought, and then we have fertilizer cost increases. But there's actually more here, right? Tariffs.
Yeah, right. We talked about this before in another episode that we did on Delta farmers. That was focused on how the Trump administration's tariffs are affecting them. So that's still a big factor here, I guess.
Oh, it's huge. Sledge Taylor said the thing is that this war could not have come at a worse time for farmers. It's spring. It's planting season. This is a time when they'll be using lots and lots of fuel and fertilizer. But he said that the farmers were already struggling even before the war. And just a quick refresher, President Trump put out a bunch of tariffs on a bunch of countries, right? But what happened is some of those countries put retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. So for farmers, that means they haven't been able to really export what they grow.
Right. And I remember that we talked about how the Trump administration had basically a farmer bailout, I think is what some of the farmers you talked to back then called it, right? Did that happen? Did they get that money and did it help?
Right. So that would be the $12 billion Farmer Bridge Assistance Program that the Trump administration created. And the idea was to help offset tariff losses. I reached out to the USDA about this, and they told me that the support is designed to help producers kind of stay afloat during these hard times. And this is something that I asked the farmers in the Delta that I talked to about. Many of them did actually get some of that money around March, but they said it was really a drop in the bucket, Take Taylor, for instance. He's a Republican. He voted for Trump in 2024, and he said that the one-time payment he received in March covered about 20% of what he lost last year. Here's how he put it.
If somebody took $100 out of my pocket and then turned around and gave me 20 back, patted me on the back and said they were my friend, I'm not really sure I would agree.
Right. I know things like drought and weather are things that nobody can control, but things like tariffs and wars, those are political decisions. They were choices made by the Trump administration. Taylor said he voted for Trump, and I'm curious, how does he feel about the administration's policies now?
Well, the way he put it is his patience is wearing thin. That's a direct quote from him. He does not support the war, and those policies are pretty devastating to him and his farm. And he said it's just so much at once, right? The thing is that with the increasing costs, he said that he's not sure that he'll be able to continue farming at all.
I think there's an old African proverb that says, when elephants fight, it's the ants that get crushed. The ants are getting crushed.
Wow, that's a good way to put that. What about the farmers that don't support the Trump administration?
Yeah, so they're also definitely frustrated. I mean, take Anthony Bland. He did not vote for Trump, and he does not support the war or these policies at all. Bland says that all farmers are feeling the same pain, right? But his problems with President Trump and his administration aren't just with their trade policies.
Black people in general, I'm not seeing the care there of people of color, whether it's black, Hispanic. I just have a problem with the way they're treating anybody that doesn't look like him.
And for black farmers like Bland, they're also having to navigate DEI cuts. The Trump administration eliminated programs that black row crop farmers rely on for credit and technical support. And these are programs that existed in the first place because black farmers have historically faced discrimination from lenders and government agencies. And because they also tend to operate at smaller scales. So that means they have less financial cushion to absorb, sudden shocks from things like wars or tariffs.
Right. And you can't talk about the Mississippi Delta without talking about the horrific history that's also there.
No, you really can't. I mean, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow, it still really echoes through those wide, flat fields in the Mississippi Delta. And it was only just a few years ago that black farm workers in the Delta settled lawsuits over claims that white laborers from South Africa were paid more for the same work.
Yeah. And, what about the future for Bland? Sledge Taylor said he's not sure if he's going to be able to continue farming. What does Bland say?
He actually said really kind of the same thing. He said that this year is make or break for him. That's how he put it. He might stop farming too. He might lease out his land and do something else.
We talk about the definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. Well, with the terrorists on top of the war, we know the results aren't going to get any better.
Wow, that's really powerful and really intense.
Yeah, I really do love talking to farmers. They're some of the kindest people, and they keep it real. They're calculating everything down to the cent because that's how important it is and how much fluctuations in world markets and prices can affect them.
Right. And farmers go through a lot. I mean, there have been crises before, and the folks you talk to, they've been doing this for a while, right?
Yeah, more than 50 years, each of them.
Gotcha. So I'm curious. How does what's happening now stack up against challenges that they've maybe seen before?
Yeah, so the farmers I talked to said they've definitely faced hard times before, right? Sledge Taylor talked about the farm crisis in the 1980s. That's when falling crop prices and high interest rates and a collapse in land values, it forced banks to fail and thousands of family farms into foreclosure. But he said he's never seen prices fluctuate as wildly as they are now. I mean, we were standing out in his field and he was thinking back on those times and he turned and he said, I actually think it's worse now than it was then. And farmers, they really take a lot of pride in how many generations their family has been farming. I mean, when you meet a farmer in the Delta, they introduce themselves by saying how many generations they've been farming. And none of them want to be the one that has to call it quits.
Drew Hawkins is senior reporter, and he wrote about the farmers he spoke with in the Mississippi Delta. You can find his reporting on NPR, and he also put together a video for this with More Perfect Union, which you can find on our Instagram page at Gulf States Newsroom. Drew, thanks for taking us on this journey through the Mississippi Delta.
Thanks for having me, Elise.
This week's show is cooked up by the Gulf States Newsroom team. Our theme music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. You can find us in your podcast feeds every Friday. Look us up and be sure to subscribe. Again, I'm your host, Elise Gregg. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to stir your roux.